The atmosphere inside the Lexington County Courthouse was thick with tension. Rows of spectators filled the gallery, whispering among themselves, eyes glued to the young man standing at the defendant's table. He looked out of place, too young, too composed, too confident for someone facing serious charges. Tristan Carter, 19, accused of grand theft auto and evading arrest. The charges carried weight, but the way Judge Albert Holloway looked at him made it clear. The real trial was about something else entirely. Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lazily against the polished wood of his bench. He peered down at Tristan over the rim of his glasses, his lips curling into something between a smirk and a sneer. "So, you think you're some kind of legal expert?" His voice carried an air of amusement, dismissive and condescending. "This isn't a debate club, son." A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor. They were all in on the joke. Tristan didn't flinch. He wasn't laughing. He had spent years preparing for this moment. Not this exact moment, but a moment like this, where he would stand in a courtroom and use the very laws designed to control people like him as a shield, a weapon, and a lesson. While other kids memorized basketball stats, he memorized case law. While his friends played video games, he played mock trials in his head. His mother, Sandra Carter, had worked as a paralegal for over 2 decades, and Tristan had absorbed everything she brought home. He knew how prosecutors cut corners, how judges played favorites, and how some defense attorneys barely tried. By the time he was 14, he could break down a trial better than most law students. But none of that mattered to Holloway. To him, Tristan was just another young man in trouble. "Let's make this quick," the judge sighed, flipping open the case file. "I have a golf game at 2. The audience chuckled again, but this time something shifted. Tristan's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. Holloway had just made his first mistake. The prosecutor, Anthony Radcliffe, rose from his seat with the air of a man who had already won. His suit was crisp, his tie perfectly knotted, and his voice carried the rehearsed confidence of someone who had delivered the same speech 100 times before. "Your Honor, the state will prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that the defendant, Tristan Carter, was caught red-handed in a stolen vehicle, a 2023 Audi A6, reported missing just hours before his arrest. Officers pursued him through downtown, where he allegedly attempted to flee before being apprehended. His fingerprints were found on the steering wheel." Radcliffe turned to the jury. "The evidence speaks for itself." The words landed with weight. The gallery shifted, whispering. On the surface, it sounded damning. Holloway glanced at Tristan, then turned back to Radcliffe. "Go on. The defense may try to convince you that this was all a misunderstanding," Radcliffe continued, "that Mr. Carter is some unfortunate victim of circumstance." He turned, locking eyes with Tristan. "But let's be honest. What kind of victim runs from the police?" The tension in the room thickened. Judge Holloway leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. Tristan didn't blink. Radcliffe continued. "Your Honor, I have here the testimony of Officer Gerald Ruiz, who personally witnessed the defendant behind the wheel before he attempted to flee. The car was confirmed stolen. The arrest was made by the book." Holloway exhaled through his nose. "Sounds straightforward to me." For most people in the room, it probably did. But Tristan saw the cracks. Still, he stayed silent, watching, waiting. Holloway tapped his gavel lightly. "All right, let's hear the defense's response." He turned to Tristan's court-appointed lawyer, a public defender named Melissa Thornton, who had barely spoken since stepping into the courtroom. She stood up, shifting nervously. "Your Honor, my client." Tristan placed a hand on her arm, a silent request. She hesitated, then sat back down. And for the first time, Tristan spoke. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. The room went completely silent. Holloway stared at him, clearly amused. You'll what? Tristan's voice was calm. Steady. I'll be defending myself. A murmur spread through the courtroom. The bailiff's eyebrows shot up. Radcliffe's smirk faltered for just a second before he let out a sharp laugh. This should be interesting. But no one was laughing when Tristan took his first step forward, because everything was about to change. The prosecution claims that Officer Ruiz personally saw me behind the wheel of the vehicle, correct? Radcliffe exhaled sharply. That's right. And that testimony is written in his report? Of course it is. Tristan turned to Holloway. Your Honor, I move to dismiss that testimony as evidence. Holloway squinted. On what grounds? Tristan pulled his hands from his pockets. Because Officer Ruiz never saw me in that car. In fact, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began. Radcliffe's confidence wavered. What are you talking about? Tristan took another step forward. Your Honor, if the court allows me, I'd like to submit a request to verify Officer Ruiz's GPS logs from that night. If his report says he witnessed me in the vehicle, then it should match his location history. But he let the word hang in the air. I have a feeling it won't. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. Holloway glanced at Radcliffe. Counselor. Radcliffe hesitated. The pause was just long enough. The jury noticed. The gallery noticed. And most importantly, the judge noticed. For the first time, the courtroom wasn't laughing anymore. Over the next hour, Tristan dismantled the prosecution's case piece by piece. He questioned the fingerprint analysis, pointing out the lack of a forensic specialist to verify the findings. He highlighted inconsistencies in the arrest report. He exposed biases in the officer's testimony. By the time the session ended, Judge Holloway wasn't smirking anymore. The jury wasn't whispering about the arrogant teenager who thought he could play lawyer. They were listening, really listening. And as Tristan took his seat, he knew one thing for certain. This trial wasn't just about proving his innocence. It was about proving he belonged in that courtroom, not as a defendant, but as the future attorney he was destined to be.